Launches are an exciting way to start a roller coaster experience, getting the train up to speed immediately instead of waiting for a long lift hill. There are a lot of different launch methods that manufacturers use to get the trains up to speed. So today, we're going to look at these different launch systems and rank them based on popularity. I would base it off of personal experience and personal preference, but I haven't experienced a coaster that has each of these launch systems, so that's why we're going to do it a bit more objectively. With that, one last rule is that defunct coasters do count towards the list, but future coasters that haven't opened yet do not. Because of that, this list will inevitably become outdated. Number 8. Compressed Air 11 Coasters. This is a pneumatic launch system and it is powerful. It hasn't been used on very many coasters though, and in fact, S&S Worldwide is really the only one to use it. They use this launch method to make the world's fastest accelerating coaster, which was, before it closed, Dodonpa 0 to 111.8 miles an hour in 1.6 seconds. Insane. The first one to use it was Hypersonic XLC, which opened at King's Dominion back in the 2001 season. Unfortunately, this didn't last very long and closed in 2007, but this really showed what this launch system could do. These compressed air launches really look like a gut punch. About half of them are located in China, but we do have a couple here in America, including Powder Keg at Silver Dollar City and Max Force at Six Flags Great America. Number 7. Weight Drop Launch 12 Coasters. This is one that goes way back. The Weight Drop is a catapult launch, and it goes all the way back to the 70s, nearly used on exclusively Schwarzkopf shuttle loops. As the name suggests, this launch uses a heavy weight that pushes the train forward. When the weight falls, the cable that's connected to it pulls the train forward at high speeds. It's definitely less, quote, technologically advanced than some of the other launch methods, but that's totally okay. It had its purpose, and it served its purpose well. From one classic launch to another, let's go to the Electric Winch, with 16 coasters to its name. This is a very similar system. It's another catapult launch that goes back to the 1970s, and for the most part, this is more of a push than it is a launch, in particular on those Aero shuttle coasters. There just isn't a lot of force coming off of those straight sections, so I can see why the Electric Winch didn't really catch on for more than 20 or so years. We did see it used in 1995 when Disney added Star Wars Hyperspace Mountain to Disneyland Paris. I was surprised to learn that this coaster used an electric winch for its launch. I thought for sure it was a magnetic launch or something along those lines, because it goes uphill and has some decent speed, so credit where credit is due. That's the best example I think of the electric winch launch. Otherwise, I would say that this is definitely the weakest launch method, and every other launch can get you up to speed in a quicker amount of time. Like the weight drop launch though, it did have its purpose. Number 5. Hydraulic 19 Coasters. Now we get to a really powerful launch method, and a launch that has a lot of technology going in behind it to make it work. In order to make a hydraulic launch work, you need a wind drum attached to a motor at the end of the launch track, and on the other end you need a catch car. A cable runs between these two things, joining the catch car to the wind drum. When you launch, the wind drum winds the cable and launches the train. The motor itself is relatively complicated. Each motor contains accumulators. In these accumulators, you have two compartments separated by a piston. Those two compartments are made of hydraulic fluid and nitrogen gas. The nitrogen gas is compressed, and this builds a lot of pressure. And when that pressure is released, it goes into the motor, causing the wind drum to rotate and ultimately launching the train. It's a fascinating system mostly used by intimate amusement rides, and it has given them the opportunity to reach heights of over 400 feet and speeds of 149 miles an hour. If you didn't know, the current record holder for the fastest coaster in the world is Formula Rossa in Abu Dhabi. It uses a hydraulic launch. Now, despite these coasters' undeniable power and the fun factor that goes into them, they've kind of phased out because of unreliability. This is understandable. On paper, these should not cost that much more than your typical chain lift hill, but with all the issues that these launch systems have had, usually, just look at Top Thrill Dragster as an example, the parks have to spend more money to keep them running. These have been replaced by magnetic launches mostly, like number 4, LIM's 22 Coasters. LIM stands for Linear Induction Motors, and as I mentioned, it's a magnetic launch. This launch has magnets on the track that interact with magnets on the train. A current is applied to the pair of fins on the track, and this creates a magnetic field. The fin on the train then moves in between these, entering that magnetic field. By this, an eddy current is produced, and this current creates an opposing magnetic field. So because of that, the fins on the train are forced forward and away from the pairs, which ultimately launches the train. These are cheaper than linear synchronous motors, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but have ultimately not been the preferred method for magnetic launches. So in short, LIMs are good, just not the best. Number 3, Flywheel 23 Coasters. I was a bit surprised to see this one so high, to be honest. A flywheel launch is kind of a pedestrian method in terms of how technologically advanced it is. It's more on par with the weight drop launch and the electric winch launch in the last couple we've talked about. Which is not to take anything away from it, of course. Zamperla has used it pretty heavily in their motorbike coasters. So a flywheel launch consists of a flywheel, I know, shocking, being spun at very high speeds. This wheel is connected to a cable which pulls the train. This has also been used on a couple Schwarzkopf shuttle loops, most notably Montezuma's Revenge at Knott's Berry Farm, though I understand that that's going through a whole refurb right now. So what have we learned with the flywheel launch? Well, sometimes simple is better. This isn't the most complicated system, and neither is it the most powerful, but it seems to work pretty consistently for a relatively low price. Number 2, tire-propelled 28 coasters. Here's another one that I was a bit surprised to see so high on the list, but really it makes sense. There are a lot of family coasters in particular that use a tire-propelled launch. There is some variation here, but typically this consists of pairs of horizontal tires which spin in opposite directions. There's then metal fins on the train that go in between these tires, and then you launch from there. As I mentioned, these are more often used on family coasters than they are on thrill coasters, which makes sense. I don't think a tire-propelled launch can get you up to 75 miles an hour super well. Definitely go with a magnetic or hydraulic launch at that point. But for family coasters, especially the Intamin straddle coasters, they work really well. This is another system where I don't feel like the technology is crazy impressive. It just works consistently, which is kind of the same thing as the flywheel launch, though I do think these have more potential than the flywheels do. Sometimes consistency is all you need, and when you're talking about family coasters especially, you want something that just works well. This is number 2 with 28 coasters, and number 1 is LSMs with 66 coasters, so it's not even close. This isn't terribly surprising though if you follow coasters. As I mentioned when talking about LIMs, this has become the standard for magnetic launches, and it really hasn't even become the standard for just magnetic launches, but I would argue launches in general. They are somewhat similar in how they work to LIMs, but they are indeed slightly different. Magnets on the track and train attract one another. As the train passes each fin on the launch track, the fields repel, causing the train to accelerate down the launch track. The cool thing about LSMs is that they can also be used as brakes. A Premier Ride Skyrocket 2 is a terrific example of this. After your swing launch sequence and disorienting layout, you come back down into the station onto the same launch track that you just launched on a moment ago, but this time you slowly come to a stop. LSMs are the only launch system that would even allow a Skyrocket 2 to exist, so in that regard they're very functional. This is the standard of the theme park industry, and when you break it down by the numbers, it's also the most popular launch in the theme park industry. So there you have it, each launch system ranked based off of popularity. Let me know what you thought, and if anything surprised you down in the comment section below. For me, I did not expect a flywheel launch to be number 3 on the list with 23 coasters, but with all those Zamperla motorbike coasters on the list, I can see why that number got up so high. So let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.